Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Hey, it's Carter Bear, and you're listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast.
All right, guys, let's hear it. How was the break? It's been 2 weeks since we've talked. I missed both of your faces. How'd it go? Talk to me.
It was good. It was good. Took some time off for the 4th, went to the lake. You know, I got to say, I know a lot of people with dogs, their dogs just don't handle fireworks well. And understandable. They don't know what they are. They don't know what's going on. But Nico, I swear there could be a bazillion fireworks going on right around him. It could be D-Day for all he cares. He's just going to sleep through it. He just does not care. In true husky form, he just fell asleep on the deck and didn't matter what was going on. He was good. And he's not an old dog or anything. He's 6. He acts like a puppy, but he's not a guard dog. I'll put it that way. He's just going to sleep. He's going to do what he wants. He has no stranger danger. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but at least when the fireworks came, he wasn't ducking for cover. He was just okay, cool. Have a snack, So it was good. We had a good time.
Well, I guess we're going to carry out a theme here because I guess the big thing for me is that my dogs got to really experience fireworks for the first time. We've been living in apartments for their entire lives, really. And then this is the first year at a house and neighbors are letting off fireworks and whatnot. And of course, we had to bring them out just to see how they would react. And honestly, I was very impressed. They were very much on alert, but not scared or anything like that. So maybe we take them out to the beach or something next year to really expose them to it,
Yeah, I ended up at a bachelor party in Chicago in Wrigleyville. And I'd been to Wrigley before for the Winter Classic back in the day, but I'd never been to a baseball game there. And what an amazing experience that is. But holy hell, is it hot. I mean, the ball game started at 1, I believe, on Saturday. And we lost 2 guys before the game even started. Now, obviously, there might have been some beverages involved, but when you're sitting in those bleachers out in left field and it's 93 degrees and it's humid, all of a sudden we're looking around and where's Mark? Where's Dan? So we had a great time, though, and it was a pretty awesome experience. And, I'd love to have the draft in Detroit, but if they don't ever do it in Detroit, I'd hope they look at Chicago, man, because I think that could be a fun time and it wouldn't be a far drive for, you two and for me to fly out there and meet you guys, and we'd have a great time. Welcome to episode 44 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I am your host, Evan Sabrin, joined by my co-hosts, Tony Wolak and Devin Little. On today's episode, we're going to look at the Red Wings' current roster construction and how that compares to last year's team. We're also going to look at some possible trade rumors that we've seen hitting the rounds on Twitter this week and how the Red Wings could be involved in those. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone where you can find us. You can find us on Twitter at Flying Octopod. Check out our YouTube channel at The Flying Octopod. Give us a like or a share or give us a comment or tell us anything you want us to talk about. We'd love to hear back from you. Feedback is always positive. And you can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So let's dive in with this, and I'll start with you first, Tony. It was pretty much kind of an underwhelming offseason for the Red Wings up to this point. There's still a lot of time for trades and moves to be made, but with the addition of James Van Riemsdyk, Mason Appleton, Jacob Bernard-Docker, Ian Mitchell, John Leonard, and most importantly, new goalie John Gibson, acquired from the Anaheim Ducks. Looking at the roster construction as it currently is, how do you think that compares to last season, and how much better do you think this team is heading into the 2025-26 season?
I feel like most people wanted the Red Wings to be more aggressive this offseason than they were, just to take another big step forward and make it a clear-cut jump into the playoffs. And it doesn't quite match that vision, but I think that's actually okay. The objective was to be harder to play against. And you get that in bringing in Mason Appleton and James Van Riemsdyk, in addition to internal growth as well. And if you look at the different positions, they all either improved or stayed neutral. So starting with the forward group, you subtract out Vladimir Tarasenko, Tyler Mott, and Craig Smith, and you add in JVR and Mason Appleton. On defense, you subtracted out Petrie and brought in Jacob Bernard-Docker. And then in goal, you took out Mrazek and Lyon and inserted Gibson. So from an offensive standpoint, the new players, they combined for 1.88 goals per 60 this past season. And the players that were shipped out or were not re-signed combined for 1.02 goals per 60 last season. And that was for all situations for both. So there is a modest increase in offense. And for that, I'm pleased. Like these are, more bottom six additions, but the bottom six didn't score very much last year. And if we're getting a little bit of a boost offensively there from Van Riemsdyk and from Appleton, so offense, not better. On defense, Bernard-Docker, Petrie, kind of a wash, if you ask me. Petrie's probably a little bit more physical and obviously has the experience, but Bernard-Docker is solid defensively in his own right. So call it a wash. And then finally in that, you have Gibson joining the fray and, Mrazek and Lyon on their way out. I mean, at least to me, that is a clear-cut upgrade. Everyone loved Alex Lyon, and I get that. He was great. He was fun. And it was cool to see Peter Mrazek back, at least for a little bit. I thought it would be a cool sort of return to your roots story. But if you're going to upgrade to John Gibson, like, at least to me, that's a clear upgrade. So offense, net improvement. Defense, net neutral. Goalie, net improvement. So to me, even if the increases are modest, the team should be better year over year, especially when you look at just the individual growth for some of these players. If you look at the top six, apart from Patrick Kane, all those players are in their prime and either on the upward trajectory or staying flat. And then on defense, you have Seider and Edvinsson playing top pair minutes and performing like a top pair, whether they're on the same line or not, but top pair quality last season, and they're only going to get better. And then you look at, across the rest of the team, and there's Ben Sherratt, there's Erik Gustafsson, there's Justin Hall, Berggren, Soderblom. There are lots of players, and Van Riemsdyk too. There are lots of players who are in a contract year, so there's incentive to perform better. So between the core players maturing and being in their peak, and then players with incentive to perform even better, I like how that looks for the Red Wings. I'm not saying they're like a clear-cut playoff team, but compared to last year's team, for me, it's a solid yes, they are better.
I agree a lot with what you said there, Tony. I think when you break it down position by position, I don't know how you can really argue against that, honestly. John Gibson significantly improves the Red Wings' goaltending situation. At least I believe he will. Defensively, like you said, probably a net neutral, at least right now. And if there is a big move this offseason, it does seem like it'll be on the back end at the very least. So stay tuned on that too, right? And then the forward group, yeah, nothing like crazy. I know everybody was really hoping for Mitch Marner, but I still look at the forward group and it looks better. Still definitely a decent sized hole on that top line, but all things considered, at the very least, this is as good, if not better, than last year's team. And that's without even accounting for the progress you're hoping to see from the young players, whether that's Seider, Raymond, Edvinsson, you know the group I'm talking about here. And then also there's that chance that a young player or two, or maybe even three joins the fray and helps elevate the team that way as well. So on paper, I think you nailed it, Tony. I think they're at least a little bit better, maybe even more better than we're giving them credit for. And then when you start to consider the possibility that young players they're kind of the unaccounted for variable here that could help the team be even better than we're thinking. I get it. Not the most sexiest offseason in the world, but efficient. And I still think they kind of got the job done. And like I kind of said before, they're not done yet. We're just over a week into July. Still plenty of time for more things to come.
You're right. It's not the sexiest offseason, but one thing to keep in mind is that it's not the Red Wings just selecting from the free agent pool. It is the Red Wings negotiating against 31 other teams in the league. And for different reasons, players may choose other teams. For other reasons, they may pick the Red Wings over the other teams. But we can armchair GM the hell out of this, and it's just not reality, because if you're on Puckpedia or whatever site it is and you're just picking the free agents you want to sign, great. You're not competing against anyone. You don't have to have your offer compete against other teams trying to get that same player. You just kind of do the math and figure it out how it all fits into the cap. But for the Red Wings, yeah, they went out and tried to sign other players to, make their team better, to make them harder to play against. And either they didn't want to commit to that same term or the same cap hit, or there were other variables at play. But it all ended up okay, though. They still got some good players to join their team that kind of fit what they're trying to do here. But I can see how it's easy for someone to look at just the net players they added, apart from John Gibson, and say, oh, they could have done more. That's not reality, though. And I'm not saying this to like be an Yzerman apologist, as people on Twitter call it. It's just reality of free agency. It's an open market, and you're competing for the same scarce resources as 31 other teams, 30 if you remove the Penguins, but you're competing for scarce resources, and it was already a thin free agent pool to begin with. So that's why I think you're seeing more and more teams look to the trade market to improve their roster now that free agency is kind of dying down.
I want to read you guys a list here real quick, and then I want you guys to tell me what this list is. Kirill Kaprizov, Kyle Connor, Adrian Kempe, Jack Eichel, Martin Netchus, Artemi Panarin, Rasmus Anderson, John Carlson, and Alex Tuck. What is that list?
Pending free agents for next season.
Exactly. Now, I don't think anyone here in their right mind expects the Red Wings to compete for a Stanley Cup this season. This team is probably 3 to 4 years away to being in that big competitive window. So I have no issue with them not going all in and getting some of these free agents. Yzerman even said, they had no chance to talk to Mitch Marner. We heard that they were big in on Nikolai Ehlers, and he didn't even want to talk to them either. So obviously growth is going to come from within. It's going to be internal growth. And we look at what we think the roster is going to look like this season. I think there's going to be a young kid or two who's going to make this lineup. And I think there's going to be some hard decisions for Yzerman and crew to make. I think guys like MBM, Nate Danielson are going to push for spots. And we're just going to continue to see these kids grow. Yzerman, I've said this a million times, and I'll say it again. I'll beat it like the dead horse that I do. It's a long-term plan. It's a long rebuild. And that's just how it's going to be. And, we talk about lottery luck and all that stuff. And I don't think the Red Wings are as, got screwed as bad as we think they did. You guys have guys like Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider who have probably outplayed their draft spots. So as these guys continue to grow, Simon Edmondson continues to grow. We wait for the development of ASP, the MBNs. There's a lot of prospects and a lot of things to look forward to, but patience is just always going to be hard for fans, and that's just how sports is in general. So this team, I think there's going to be minimal improvement. I think a lot hinders on John Gibson, his availability. There has been injury concerns with him over the years. He only started 29 games last year, but before that, he started 46, 53, 56. This is a guy who has a career save percentage of .910, which is, above average. So there's reasons to be optimistic, and I still think there's moves coming. I don't think you can come back and play with this same defense. Your only upgrade is pretty much Jacob Bernard Docker, who's a third pairing defenseman. So I'm still going to keep the faith that something else is going to happen in the next few weeks as far as roster moves. But you see all these people on social media who are all down, and you just said it, Tony, being an Yzerman apologist, and people calling for Yzerman's head, which I think is ridiculous at this point. But you have to see the long-term plan. And Yzerman doesn't care if you do or you don't. He's still going to do it. With the amount of prospects that the Red Wings have, when they are ready to compete, there's not enough room for all of these guys. Those guys equal trade chips for when they are ready to compete for those guys that they can trade for. That's what happens when you build a really great prospect pool, as Steve Yzerman has with this team. So my optimism is probably around the same as it was going into last year, but if John Gibson can make those 50, 55 starts maybe, and stay healthy and be the goaltender that we know he can be, I think there's a very good chance that this team could be a playoff team this year.
I think it'll be closer to a 50-50 split with Cam Talbot, but I don't think that's going to be a bad thing either, just because it's just, you see it in the NBA more often than you do in the NHL, but just like load management, wanting to maximize rest, minimize wear and tear on the body. Given Gibson's injury history, yeah, I think 55 games is probably a little too much. But if it's closer to 40 or 45, give Sebastian Kosa a couple spot starts here and there, I think that could get him through the season unscathed and, keep him in a good spot if the Red Wings make the playoffs.
And for what it's worth, even if it is a tandem, I think with John Gibson in place, you have your first legitimate 1A, 1B tandem. Every tandem they've had over the last 5 years or so is more of a 2A, 2B tandem. And I think that Gibson kind of legitimizes their goaltending in a way that you can confidently call it a 1A, 1B. Talbot can definitely, even last season, was still playing at a starter caliber level. And it's what you're expecting Gibson to come in and do as well. So even if it's not Gibson coming in to play 60 games out of the season, he at least gives you confidence in the goalie tandem that we, like I said, really haven't had this decade.
We really ought to rename this podcast the Flying Optimism Podcast.
Flying Optimism Podcast?
Yeah.
Optimism Flying Out the Window Podcast?
Come on, man. I'm not trying to get in there. Enough!
When I talk about moves that could still happen for the Red Wings in the upcoming weeks here, a lot of chatter this week on Twitter about Erik Karlsson. 35-year-old future Hall of Famer. Still has 2 years left on his deal at a $10 million cap hit. A lot of talk about him being moved as the Penguins start their inevitable rebuild to where Gary Bettman hands them Gavin McKenna next year. When I think of Erik Karlsson and I see all these rumors and trade speculations, I think the name is what really pops out to everyone. It's the sexy name. And you have to preface that by saying that, Erik Karlsson is not the Erik Karlsson of 5 years ago, the Erik Karlsson who was putting up 80 to even 90 points in the past few years. This is not the same player that he once was, obviously. Tony, I know you were a fan of Erik Karlsson joining the Red Wings. What do you think Erik Karlsson could bring to this team, this young team?
You're right that he's got the brand recognition, but he's not that same Erik Karlsson. I agree 100%. Still, I think he'd be a great fit for the Red Wings. They have a clear hole on the right side behind Seider. I would rather see a bona fide top four defenseman there than, Albert Johansson there again, overslotted in that position. He may be a top four defenseman one day, but don't throw him to the wolves. Let him grow in a less strenuous role and have him push for that spot as opposed to, well, he's the best we got. I think Karlsson would, obviously he would improve the team offensively. He is a breakout machine. And even at, age 35 now, he still was sixth in the league in scoring among defensemen this past season. All of his microstats are outstanding as well, except for that zone entry defense, which we'll get to later on. But we're focusing on the pros right now. The benefits that he can bring to the Red Wings. I do think there's something about having a player of his caliber on the team and with his experience and his leadership that will rub off well on Seider, on Evanson, on Johansson, on Sandy Pellikka, on these young players, having a true superstar on the team. It's the same deal as with Patrick Kane with the forwards, but they need one of those for the defenseman. And so, I look at Karlsson and obviously see the value in him, his mentorship, his leadership, his offensive skills, his breakouts, being a top four right-handed defenseman who still skates really, really well. There is a lot to like about him joining the team, but the price has to be right to make it happen. And what is that price? It really depends on who you ask. He is one tough valuation equation. I mentioned all those pros, but like as Evan also said, he's 35. He's got 2 years left at 10 million on his deal. His defensive zone play is not the best. And obviously, when you're getting up there in age, as a 35-year-old, and I can speak for this firsthand, there's injury risk as well. For what the Red Wings would need to trade for a player like him, that, I mean, we could throw out names, we can throw out ideas, but it could be a wide range of things when and if a deal actually takes place.
Absolutely. And I love the callback to Patrick Kane joining the Red Wings, because I think that's the exact effect that it would have. You kind of add a highly decorated, clearly past his prime, but highly decorated, highly respected player in their position group. And you just kind of hope that they rub off on some of your young players. We saw that with Patrick Kane and Lucas Raymond and a few others as well. You'd hope that Erik Karlsson does the same thing. And for what it's worth, too, Patrick Kane kind of legitimized the Red Wings at a time where the media and whatnot still weren't really taking them seriously. Now they're like one of the more highly televised teams when it comes to national broadcasts. And I know that doesn't really matter, especially on the fan level, but it does it does something for the team. It's important to be taken seriously, quite frankly. And I think that adding a brand name like Erik Karlsson is another way of doing that. And also, like you said, Tony, it's not the worst fit in the world. And in fact, I make an argument it's a pretty good fit. Yes, he's got 2 more years and he's 35 years old, but that's about the amount of length you ideally want to give a right-handed defenseman right now, right? If you believe in Axel Sedin-Pellikka, you don't want to block him forever. So give him that 2-year buffer to have the time and be able to spend time in Grand Rapids. And then maybe next year is his mentor year with Karlsson. Maybe he's kind of getting spot opportunities in Detroit, maybe sheltered a little bit, and then over the course of the season, he takes on more responsibility thanks to the knowledge that Karlsson passed on. Maybe, I don't know. But and obviously the cap hits super high. $10 million is nothing to sneeze at, but I think you can incentivize Pittsburgh to retain a decent chunk of that and make it a lot more palatable. I get why folks might not be super excited about this idea. I get it. He's like the quintessential guy that raises the argument for a best defensive defenseman award aside from the Norris Trophy. But the fact of the matter is Erik Karlsson won 3 Norris Trophies. You don't do that on accident. And like I said, that's kind of how he would legitimize the Red Wings blue line. And for what it's worth, too, you're not bringing Erik Karlsson in to be their top defenseman. In fact, you're asking him to play the lowest role he's played in his entire career. He'd be playing behind Seider. You would be putting him in advantageous situations because you have Seider to take on the tougher assignments as well. So, like you said, Tony, there's a little bit more we can dive into this here, and I'll hold off right now, but all the pros and cons considered, for me, there's, as long as the price is right, of course, this is something worth pursuing because it does enough for the Red Wings, and it kind of constitutes the big splash everybody wants to see, that it would just make enough people happy and address things that need to be addressed. And for what it's worth, too, like you mentioned, Tony, Pittsburgh's like the only team not trying to get better, so you can presumably offer them a package filled with futures, and you'd be able to get them to accept it. Whereas pretty much any other team you're trying to make a deal with, you're looking at more of a hockey trade because they're trying to get better too.
Well, it's funny that you said the price is right. So let's play the price is right. I don't think it'll cost much for Erik Karlsson. They want to get rid of that salary. If you can't see this team's going to be tanking for Gavin McKenna, then I'm sorry for you. But Erik Karlsson is the sexy name, and I think his mentorship would be great, and I think it would definitely appease some fans who are underwhelmed by this offseason. But I don't know. Erik Karlsson had a pretty strong performance in the Four Nations tournament. He played really well there. Tony, if we did play the prices right, what kind of prospects or draft picks do you think would go to the Penguins in a deal like this? Because looking at Twitter, and I know you put out that tweet today about Erik Karlsson with a lot of his metrics and analytics, and I've seen people saying it would cost Nate Danielson and possibly a second-round pick. Nate Danielson is not going anywhere for Erik Karlsson. But what do you think a deal like this would look like for the Red Wings to bring in Erik Karlsson?
Well, first, I think it's worth mentioning that he does have a full no movement clause. So
Correct.
if the Red Wings or any team agree to a deal with the Penguins, he'd need to approve it. Just want to get that out there first. It's not a simple transaction by any means. But, looking at the pros and cons we mentioned, and also thinking about, I mentioned this with the free agents too, but also just the scarcity in the league and the demand. And there's a lot of teams that still have 10 million plus in cap space that could take on his contract with ease. It's going to be interesting about how Pittsburgh handles the salary retention. They're not retaining salary on any players currently. So they have 3 retention spots. And if you look at their roster, there's Ryan Russ, there's Rickard Rakell, there's Erik Karlsson, and maybe they deal Crosby down the road, maybe not. But the first 3 players I mentioned, they have term on their contract. So if you're retaining salary on any of them, it's going to stay with you for a little bit. And so what the Red Wings trade for Karlsson, it depends on if salary is retained, in my opinion. As for what they're looking for, the prospect pool is kind of shallow. Like this team has been competing for a cup for a long time and have been dealing futures to address immediate needs, picking later in the first round. They haven't been great lately and have accrued some quality draft picks, but there's still a lot of room to grow in that regard. I think on defense, they probably need more help than on offense, personally, looking at their prospect pool, but there's a need there. Draft picks, I actually don't think that would be a top concern for them. They have, over the next 3 years, they have all their first round picks. They have 7 second round picks and 7 third round picks. They have plenty of draft picks. If they want to get more, great. But I don't think that's going to be the main thing they're asking for. I do think they'll be asking for young NHL players or NHL-ready players or players or prospects who are very close to making the NHL. And so looking at the Red Wings organization, some of the players that come to mind there are Elmer Soderblom, Jonathan Berggren, Carter Mazur, Albert Johansson. And then if we want to, get into the prospect pool a bit more, there's William Wallinder, Shai Buim, maybe Antti Tuomisto, Amadeus Lombardi. I'm not mentioning Detroit's premium assets here, like their recent first-round picks or their upcoming 2026 first-round pick. I just can't see them willing to part with those premium assets for Karlsson. Like, again, it's not Karlsson of 10 years ago. It is Karlsson right now. And if Pittsburgh is asking for a Danielson, for a Bronzek Nygaard, for a 2026 first-round pick, even if it's protected for the top 12, or Kosa or Augustine or any of Detroit's tier 1 prospects, I would say no, forget it. I would rather use those as trade chips, if I'm going to use them as a trade chips at all, for a young, controllable first-line forward or top 6 forward, or a young, controllable top 4 defenseman, preferably on the left side, to just fit into that cohort that you're building around for the next, 7 to 10 years. Karlsson's going to be in Detroit for probably 2 years if the Red Wings actually do acquire him. Beyond that, probably not much longer, because he'll be 37 when his contract expires, or about to turn 37, but they should not be dealing those premium assets for Karlsson. So I think that's where this whole valuation thing that I was talking about before comes into play is, are they retaining salary or not? Or how much are other teams offering? If the Red Wings can get away with trading Wallinder, Berggren, and maybe throw in Erik Gustafsson to run their power play and then flip him at the deadline, sure, absolutely. Take that deal 7 days out of 7. But if they want a Danielson, a Kosa, Augustine, one of those key prospects, that's going to be a no for me, dog.
You hang up the phone or you give him the Nick Tarnasky treatment. That's what I would probably do if they asked for any of those top end prospects.
Bang! Come on, man. Bang! I said stop looking like an idiot.
Devin, what do you think on that?
I think that there is a reason why Tony is our resident contract negotiator, because yes, I agree. I think like you said, Tony, I think the retention's kind of like the big variable here that impacts everything. Because if you're getting Carlson at 10 million, I mean, I imagine, yeah, you're going to send like a Gustafson back or maybe a Justin Hall. Kyle Dubas has familiarity with him going back to their time in Toronto. Maybe that's an appeal for whatever reason, helps kind of lower the money coming into Detroit as well. But even if you're sending a decent chunk of change back, you're still taking on a $10 million cap hit for next year. There's just no way you're giving up a premium asset. I mean, the only way that it's even possible, in my opinion, to give up a premium asset is if they're retaining half. So you're getting Karlsson at $5 million. And even then, I'm not sure. I don't really start to think about this as a premium asset trade until I think about the possibility of it being Karlsson and someone else and another piece. Because then you're looking at a bigger thing here. And at some point you do have to give up a lot. But for what it's worth, I like Tony's package he put together there. Berggren seems like he would be part of this. It seems like Berggren's going to be part of any deal they make this offseason just because he's kind of like that quintessential young forward that has shown promise but just doesn't have a fit. And then you tack on, pick your favorite defensive prospect of ours that isn't named Sending Pelika. William Cool, Wallander Cool, Tuomisto, have at it. And then whatever you need to fill out the deal there, you're good. So yeah, I do agree with Tony. And for what it's worth, I do want to address this real quick too. The big bugaboo about Karlsson, aside from his age and his contract, is his lack of defensive play. I think that with where the Red Wings are right now, with what they were able to do in free agency and what they aren't able to do, and obviously I don't know all of what's out there on the market, on the trade market, but with what is rumored to be out there and what's not, and just what's available, what's left, the Red Wings aren't going to be able to significantly improve their defense, at least not on the blue line. They might be able to improve their defensive play from the forward group, but on the blue line, it's just not going to improve in a significant way. All their possibilities to do that aren't possibilities anymore. So what do? You chart a new course. You figure out how to adapt. If you can't improve your defense, improve your goaltending. You did that with Job Gibson. Improve your offense. You've done that a little bit with the moves you've already made, but you can significantly do that by adding Erik Karlsson. So if you can't reduce your goals against in a meaningful way, raise your goals for in a meaningful way. And that's what Erik Karlsson could do for you.
So, Devin, you didn't mention another asset that could possibly come over with Karlsson that you brought up on Twitter this week. Who is this Pontiac native that you speak of?
That would be Brian Rust, guy who's pretty much made a career out of riding shotgun with Sidney Crosby. Had 65 points last season. Kind of plays. He's, to quote Pavel Datsuk here, he's kind of the piano pusher or piano puller. Kind of does the dirty work to create space for Crosby and the gang. And I feel like if he is maybe part of a Karlsson trade, he makes just a tick over $5 million. So that's a $15 million cap hit between him and Karlsson. You definitely have to do some salary finagling there one way or another. But not only are you getting that top four right-handed defenseman, but then you're getting a player that could potentially fill that spot next to Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond, at least on the short term. And then over the course of the 3 years, I believe, that are left on his contract, you're hoping that eventually a young player forces him out of that spot. But theoretically, if his production on the top line with the Penguins last year is any indication, he can at least fill that spot on the top line, like I said, with Larkin and Raymond for this season, and kind of buys them a little time to find a more long-term solution. But like I said, if you're making a deal for both Karlsson and Russ, not only do you have to finagle salary, but you're going to have to give up a little bit more than you are just for Karlsson. So maybe that's when we are talking about a premium asset. I do want to emphasize a premium asset would just be one being included in a deal. But even then, I don't know, because Karlsson's 35 and Russ is 33. So it's not like, it still goes back to that idea of you do not want to spend premium long-term assets for short-term gain, especially when you're at this stage of a build.
I think it's one or the other, but not both. Because you're right. It's like I would not want to give up like a Danielson or a Buchelnikov or Augustine or whoever it is. If you're going to get someone who's 33 or 35 or 33 and 35, only to have them continue down a downward slope from an age curve perspective. That just doesn't make sense for this team where they are right now.
And sticking with the Pittsburgh Penguins, today they acquired Matt Dumba in a salary dump trade from the Dallas Stars. And out the door went disposable right-sided defenseman and former Flint Firebird Vladislav Kolchonak. So the Penguins now have 6 righties on their blue line. So I'm looking for a deal to be made somewhere else there too. So it'll be interesting to see if Karlsson is a targeted acquisition for Steve Yzerman. And I do agree with you, Tony. I think there are intangibles that he does bring for people to get too excited about the name. And obviously it is a sexy name, but it's not as sexy as it was 5 or 6 years ago. And with that, we're going to move on to our news and notes. And as a Michigan State alum, it wasn't the best week for me. I know Devin's laughing. He doesn't give a shit because his Western Michigan Broncos are defending national champions. But 2026 projected number 1 overall pick, and let's not kid ourselves, he will be the number 1 overall pick, Gavin McKenna, decided to sign with that hockey powerhouse in Happy Valley, Penn State. And it was rumored, and I did talk to some people at the draft who said there was a good shot that McKenna would want to play in East Lansing with his boy Caden Lindstrom. So I was very excited about that, only to be heartbroken this week to see that he received a $700,000 deal to play in Happy Valley. So that was a bummer. Also, Michigan State forward and 2025 Hobey Baker winner Isaac Howard, who was a first-round pick by the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2022, was sent to the Oilers for center Sam O'Reilly, who was a 2024 first-round pick. So the Iceman, as he likes to call himself, who I know a lot of Red Wings fans were hoping that the Red Wings would kick the tires on that did not come to fruition. So Isaac Howard will be joining Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in Edmonton, and it looks like he will be on the roster next season up there in Alberta. I was kind of bummed by that deal. I was really kind of hoping that the Red Wings could kick the tires on that and see what that would take. But again, don't know what that would have cost. I know I mentioned that on Twitter and I got some kickback, but I saw a lot of rumors about there might be attitude issues and some problems. Could be a locker room, concern. But yeah, I guess Howard's going to go there and play with the big boys in Edmonton. So we'll see how that ends up playing out.
It would have been nice if the Red Wings got Isaac Howard, but I guess it just wasn't meant to be, and that's fine. They have a deep prospect pool anyway, and if they want to make adjustments there, they certainly have a lot of players they could consider dealing. Well, that'll do it for episode 44 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Remember to give us a follow on Twitter, on YouTube, across all of our social channels. We'll be back next week, and we'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.